So hello, everyone. I'm Rita McGrath. Little Christmas spirit here at the fireside this time. That was said to me by one of my team members. My guest this week is Garry Ridge, the longtime CEO of the WD-40 company and a student of management, a student of leadership, an author of a couple of terrific books. One is called Helping People Win at Work, and I really recommend it. It's just so full of common sense, I mean, things that are easy to understand, but really hard to do. And then more recently, a book called Tribe Culture, which I can also recommend. I've got lots of sticky notes and things in there. And what Gary's done is just absolutely remarkable, taking a company that, as you say, is in the squeak, smell, and dirt business and turning it into a really positive example of positive leadership and engagement. So welcome. And maybe just start with what you're proud of. You've been there quite a while, since 1997. Some of the things that you've demonstrated there and are most proud of.
G'day, Rita. It's just a delight to be with you. Thank you for inviting me to come and chat with you today. And I was going to be down by our fire, but we haven't got it on this morning. So I'm here from my home office. But, what I'm proud of is being given the opportunity to lead a company through many different times in our life, and more so the way it's been able to develop people. I firmly believe that as leaders, it's our job to create an environment where people go to work every day, they make a contribution to something bigger than themselves, they learn something new, they feel safe and are protected by a compelling set of values, and they go home happy. A lot of people don't come to work smiling, but a lot more don't leave work smiling. And, Aristotle, who was born in 384 BC, said something. He said, pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work. And I think we're slow learners. So I'm just, I'm honored to be and privileged and grateful to be in the position I'm in. And I love it every day.
That's fantastic. So maybe we could spend a little time on your journey. You obviously weren't born in San Diego. and you talk about Mr. Knox, and you talk about the ladies with the lollies in the newspapers. I just think it's interesting to know where these ideas come from.
I was born in Sydney, Australia, and so I'm an Aussie. And as you're right, I joined WD-40 in 1987 to open the Australian subsidiary. Back then, the company was just starting on its ambition to be a more global brand. The brand was already very strong in the United States, where it was developed. WD-40 was developed in 1953 in San Diego to stop corrosion and condensation in the umbilical cord of the space rocket. So we came out of the space industry. And there's an interesting story there too, Rita. There were 39 formulas that didn't work. The 40th one worked. That's why it's called WD Water Displacement 40th Formula. But back in 87, they asked me to join them. I had already got to know the company because I was working for the licensee for the brand in Australia. And I opened the Australian company with a fax machine under my bed at home because we started from scratch. And then in January 1988, we opened the operation, and from 88 to 94, I spent actually most of my time in Asia. Sydney was our base, but we were really doing a lot of work in looking at how do we stop squeaks and create memories in China and Vietnam and Taiwan and all of those countries. And then in 1994, 7 years later, I was having a conversation with my then boss, the head of WD-40 in the US, and I said, is there anything else you'd like me to do? He said, funny you should ask. I said, why? He said, would you like to move to the United States? Well, our dear friend Whitney Johnson would call that disrupt yourself. That's a complete disruption.
That's an S-curve moment, if ever there was one, right?
Serious S-curve moment. Anyhow, my dad was an engineer, and I said, I was talking to him about it, and he said, Garry, you can't go wrong with that stuff, son. So we packed up our toys and we moved to San Diego. And I spent most of my time from 94 to 97 actually traveling back and forth to Europe as we were starting to set up our operations then. And in 97, our CEO retired. And for some reason, we're a public company, but for some reason, our board of directors thought that this crazy Aussie guy might be someone who could lead a US public company. I don't even think I'd been to Wall Street at that stage. So, and then the journey began. And a pivotal point in my life was when I realized I was consciously incompetent, and I'd learned the three most important words I've ever learned in my life, and they are, I don't know. And I decided I'd go back to school. So I went to the University of San Diego and I did a master's degree in leadership. And that's where I met my mentor, Ken Blanchard, who we wrote the book with. And I really discovered that, you know, if we were to be successful in life and business, it was about setting people free. And I'd learned some of those lessons, as you mentioned, back when I worked in a hardware store with Mr. Knox. I delivered newspapers to Mrs. Peel. I worked in a sporting goods store when I was growing up. And it was always, if you took care of the customer and you took care of the people you worked with, good things seemed to happen. So I went back to school. I got my degree. The degree didn't matter to me, but what mattered was the learning. And that's when we went on our journey of creating an organization where, you know, we really wanted to increase the will of the people.
Yeah, I absolutely love the title of this book, Helping People Win at Work, but the subtitle's even more important, a business philosophy called Don't Mark My Paper, Help Me Get an A. And I think that is so important. When I first started teaching at Columbia, and that was in 1993, so it was a while ago, and I taught the core strategy class in the MBA program. Now, Columbia admits, you know, like 1 out of 13 applicants. I mean, it's an incredibly selected place. So they're all super people, right? And yet, for whatever reason, my esteemed university said that all of us in the core, teaching in the core, had to grade everybody on a curve. So, you know, so you got these super people in your classroom, and yet you're forced to grade them on a curve. And I always thought that was crazy. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that philosophy, because as I understand it, it got Ken in trouble in his university as well.
Well, you know, Ken says, life's about getting A's, not about some stupid distribution curve. That's Ken's quote. And when Ken was teaching, I think it was at Cornell or somewhere, he used to give out the final paper at the beginning of the class. And, you know, the administration would say, what the hell are you doing, Blanchard, giving out the final paper? He said, not only am I giving out the final paper, you know what I'm going to do for the next period while I'm in this class? I'm going to help them learn the answers, because it's about learning the answers. And when I heard Ken tell that story when he was my professor, I went, duh. You know what? The biggest problem we have in organizations is there is not clarity around what a desired outcome is. So what are we going to hold ourselves accountable for? And secondly, we as leaders don't do what we should do, which is to help people achieve what they've identified as their A. So I took Ken's idea and his practice, and I turned it into our talent development program at WD-40 Company. And at the company, we don't have managers. Everybody's called a coach. So my direct reports, I am their coach, and it's my responsibility to, with them, determine what an A looks like at the beginning of the year. And then all through the year, my job is to help them get that A. And if I'm not helping them get that A, I'm not living up to my responsibility of helping someone step into the best version of their personal self. And that's why, you know, we see ourselves as a learning organization. We don't make mistakes. We have learning moments. And we took the word failure out because people are so afraid of failure. They're going to get in trouble. And we said, learning is a wonderful opportunity. So our definition of a learning moment is a positive or negative outcome of any situation that must be openly and freely shared to benefit all people. So if you're in any one of our operations in any one of our countries around the world on any day, you would hear someone say, oh, I had a learning moment. Let me share it with you. I had a learning moment. Let me share it with you. And here's what I did, and here's the outcome, and here's what I did, and I didn't like this outcome. You should watch out for that. So we're absolutely a learning organization. And if you think about tribe, we call ourselves a tribe, not a team. The number one responsibility of a tribal leader is to be a learner and a teacher. If we were to go back thousands of years, Rita, and observe the Indigenous Australians in the outback of Australia, at a tribal meeting, what would the tribal leader be doing? The tribal leader would be teaching the young tribe members to throw a boomerang. Why? Because if you weren't proficient at throwing a boomerang, you would not survive. Because the boomerang was the tool of survival. So our job as leaders in organizations, our tool of survival is learning. So let's be learners and let's be teachers.
I love that. I love that. But it didn't start out that way. So you talk about one of the first things you tried to do at WD-40 was break down the silos. And I think that's where an awful lot of organizations really get stuck. And well-meaning. I mean, this is not people, wake up in the morning and say, oh, I wish I had silos. But they creep up and information hoarding creeps in. And what were some of the things you did to break that down?
Well, as I was in the company and looking kind of from a distance before I moved to the United States, and let me tell you, the company was a great company. Mm-hmm. However, for what it was on the day, it wasn't going to be what it needed to be in the future, because we had these silos of knowledge, and I called them silos of knowledge. I wanted to turn them into fields of learning. And what was the power of the silo of the knowledge? The more knowledge I had and the less I shared with you, the more power I had. So I thought, wow, how do we break down that power base without hurting the people? And that's truly where the learning moment came in. I started a program in the company really early on where I said, I want everyone to share with me on a monthly basis, some of the things that didn't work. Share your knowledge with me. And we ran a contest, actually. And I said, at the end of the year, we're going to take all this learning and someone in the company is going to win a first-class trip around the world with their partner to visit all of our offices. So everyone said, wow, do we trust this guy? I wonder what's going to happen here. And we had monthly prizes. So the first month, I didn't get too many people submitting. But what I did do is I made heroes of those that did submit. It's a bit like our friend Alan Mullally talks about, the red and the green. Well, back there, our green was really red. But nobody was prepared to come out because they were afraid. So I made heroes of them. And the second month, I got a few more, and I made heroes of them. And the third month, and now they got to the point where, wow, this is a safe zone. And by the end of the year, I was getting a couple of hundred, replies a month from people about this power of sharing. And it really became something we were able to then embed. It became our way of life at WD-40. Suddenly, these silos of knowledge collapsed and we went into this field of learning and people were running through the field and loving what they were doing. So it took a while, but again, we were able to break them down and now it's just natural.
Natural. That's wonderful. Yeah, Alan talks a lot about a phrase he says that I love is, you can't manage a secret.
Exactly. You can't manage a secret.
And problems rarely get better over time.
They never get better over time.
So one of the things I really enjoyed about the introduction to tribe culture is you talk about soul-sucking CEOs and what they do.
Here he is. This is Al, the soul-sucking CEO or the soul-sucking leader. And he has some terrible, terrible habits. Would you like me to share his habits?
I would love to know more.
Well, number one, Al is a master of control and a know-it-all. Number two, he's corporate royalty. He's fought to find his way to the top of this organization, so they shall bow down to Al. Al says learning is for losers. Al, his ego eats his empathy instead of his empathy eating his ego. It's all about me, 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 me. Oh, and don't forget, Al has all the answers. Every answer Al has. He's always right. Don't forget, he is always right. He loves a fear-based culture. He says micromanagement is essential. He doesn't follow through on any of his commitments, and he hates feedback. So these are the attributes of Al, the soul-sucking CEO or the soul-sucking leader. And I had these little dolls made. You can see it says the soul-sucking CEO on the back. And as we were chatting before we came on, usually we'd be out traveling, and I speak on this subject around the world, and I take these with me.
Mm.
I give them out, and people actually come up to me at the end, can I have an Al doll? I know Al, and I want to leave it on his desk.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. But it is fascinating to me that so many of the leaders about whom, Harvard Business Review cases get written, that get featured in the business press, they're Al, right? And one of our commentators says, Chainsaw Al Dunlop. I remember teaching a case about him. And I have always, well, philosophically, I just think it's a terrible way to live your life. I just don't get it. But that aside, I don't think it's a road to good performance, right? In the long run.
No, it's, in business, we have two things, really. We have the will of the people, and we have strategy. Mm-hmm. And, you're the expert on us learning to be good strategists, of course. So, I could get Dr. Rita to come along and put my management team through a course of how to build a great strategy. And you'd look at it at the end, Rita, and you say, you know what, I'm going to give you 70 out of 100. That's a pretty good strategy. However, if on the other side of that, the will of the people or the employee engagement is 10, 10 times 70 is 700. But let's say our strategy is worth 50 out of 100. It's kind of okay. And the will of the people is 80. 80 times 50 is 4,000. So, if we don't have the will of the people, if we don't have a culture where people, are looking at something in a purpose that's meaningful, have a just cause. Our just cause at the company is to make life better at work and at home. That's our just cause. Mm-hmm. Why are we in business? Our why statement is we exist to create positive, lasting memories, solving problems in factories, homes, and workshops around the world. So we know what our just cause is, and we know why we exist. And it's those, and thank goodness, going into COVID, we had our culture to rely on. Mm-hmm. Because, as you know, about 70% of people who go to work every day are disengaged. Mm-hmm. This year, they weren't disengaged. They were drastically disengaged. Mm-hmm. We have a 93% employee engagement. We've been measuring it for 20 years now. 98% of our people say they love to tell people they work at WD-40 company. And 97%, get this one, say they respect their coach. Now, that's their boss. Mm-hmm. Most people leave organizations because they hate their boss. And there's some research out there that said 64% of people would take a pay cut if they could fire their boss.
That's true. That's true. And, you do see so many of these dysfunctional workplaces. And in the course of my career, I've met a lot of Als. But I think the risk of an Al type leader is really accentuated now, because what I talk about is, the tools of reducing uncertainty are the tools you've talked about. It's the tools of learning, testing assumptions. I don't know, let's go find out, sharing knowledge, right? And our sort of archetypal, his inherited view of leadership is the bureaucracy one, right? Which is you break a task down into its smallest component pieces, and the only place it all comes together is at the top. And I've said for years, by the time something gets to the top of most large organizations, it's lost all meaning. You really don't know what is going on. And in a lot of companies, people are rewarded for not bringing up the problems and not bringing up the issues. And I think that's just that style of leadership, I don't think works in high uncertainty situations, because you need the people I talk about out at the edges. You need them, being willing to talk to you and give you the input and the information.
Absolutely. And that's where you find the answers. If you think about servant leadership, and Ken Blanchard describes it, he says it's a pyramid. Mm-hmm. And at the beginning, the pyramid, at the top is the leader, right? And what's their job? Their job is to set the strategy, make sure we've got the resources, build the culture, whatever. And then what do? You turn the pyramid upside down, and the leader goes to the bottom. And our job then is to cheer on and be the people who help the people succeed. We're not here to mark your paper. We're here to help you get an A. The other thing that really drove me on this concept, and one of the things we studied in class 20 some years ago was the theory that at GE about culling the bottom 10%. And I said, so if that's the case, if I go to human resources, I would have to ask them this question. Have you hired our quota of losers this year? Right? So I said, instead of culling the 10%, these are someone's precious child. Instead of culling them, what if we help them improve? Would that be something good instead of culling them? And that's another thing that drove our philosophy of not marking someone's paper, helping them get an A.
Mhm.
You know, Bob Chapman, great leader of a company called Barry Weinmiller, says, remember, everybody who comes to work is someone's precious child. We have no right to mess with their life. Our job is to help them have a good life. And we can do that.
I love that. That is absolutely great. So I think one of the more practical things that's I think it's in the book with Ken, is how you do that. Like if that you have an annual sort of, what's the final exam look like? And then, as I understand it, quarterly updates to that. And people only write their own performance evaluation with a lot of structure on how to do that. So maybe you could walk us through that, because I think that's unusual. That's different.
Yeah, well, if you think about the old, probably not the old way, but how most reviews happen, this is kind of what happens. It's the 350th day of the year. The phone rings in a manager's office and they say, hi, Rita, this is Garry from Human Resources. I hope you're having a nice day. Don't forget that your annual reviews have got to be in before the end of the year, because if they're not, we can't put them in the system and blah, blah, blah. And Rita says, of course, yeah, got that. Hangs up the phone, goes, oh dear. Now, if you're really, really a bad company, you've actually given them some computer program that you can go in and just add things to. And it comes up with a number at the bottom and you say, you got a 4 out of 5. So Rita goes over and talks to one of her employees and say, hi, Julie, you got a 4 out of 5. That's your review rating for the year. Oh, here's a couple of things you could have done better. And Julie should say, thank you for telling me about those things I could have done better. If you told me about them 349 days ago, I might have done something about it. So, and not only that, Rita has 15 reviews she's got to do in a week. So do you think any of them now, if you did them, Rita, I know they'd be high quality, but do you think any of them would be high quality? No. So we said, okay, let's take the burden off. At the beginning of the year, we are very clear. What are our strategic objectives? What are our goals? I share my goals right through the company. All of our leaders do. And you would sit down with your coach and you'd determine from your job specification, what of the essential functions, which ones are really valuable. You would list them, and then you would describe what an A looks like for the year. The second part of it is you might have some specific objectives that you want to achieve during the year. So these would be your goals. And thirdly, and probably most importantly, we list our values. And we have our values, and we only have 2 measurements of values. You either visit them or you live them, and we don't like a lot of visitors. So once you've agreed that, you go off, and at least every 90 days, and sometimes even more, you'll come back to your coach and say, here's how I'm doing against this. I think I'm on track to get an A here. I'm getting a B here, and here's why. I think I need some training in this certain area, or I'm having a problem with communicating with another part of the organization. Could you help me build that bridge? Or something else has happened. And our job as a coach is to help them take away these roadblocks. And then the same with the goals. In the values side, because values are so important to us, we ask our tribe members to share with us how they've lived one of our values during the last 90 days.
Well, they tell a story about it.
Yes.
Ah.
So, for example, our number one value is we value doing the right thing. Now, there's a paragraph that describes what that means. And our values, there are only 6 of them, and they're hierarchical. The first value is more powerful than the last value. So the first one is we value doing the right thing. The second one is we value creating positive, lasting relationships in our organization. So someone might talk about how they delighted a customer, how they helped a tribe mate, whatever. But this way, the values get embedded in the behavior, which is really what we want. Because anyone in our company can make any decision they need to make as long as they use our values to make that decision. Because I don't want people quacking up the hierarchy, it's not our policy, quack, quack, quack. We can't do that, quack, quack, quack. And then they actually get to the big King Mallard duck, quack, quack. He's got to go to the boss to get the answer. That's not empowerment. We want people to be empowered to serve our customers, to serve each other.
And I like the way that you frame the trade-offs. One of the things that Patty McCord and I talked about, she was the founding HR person at Netflix. And and one of the things they've done at Netflix is they've been incredibly explicit, right? Which is, superior talent gets superior rewards. Acceptable talent gets a great severance. Now, if that's what your values are, right, you're going to have to accept that. That means it's going to be slightly internally competitive. It's not going to be that comfortable for people that can't rise to that occasion, and so forth. So I think it's interesting that you've been incredibly explicit about the hierarchy of those values. So if something isn't safe, that has a different place than if something involves telling stories or building bonds or something like that. I think that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's really
for our listeners, something that is in the book, and I'll just repeat it again. With Helping People Win at Work, which came out in 2008, right? 2009. But what's interesting is this is very consistent. I mean, you haven't really changed what you're doing, and all the documents are here in the appendix. So if you want to see how the performance review documents are laid out, I think they're incredibly practical, and just so that's just an extra bonus for people that would like to get the book. So
I like seeing that document with lots of coffee stains on it. It's a working document. That's what we want. When I see them and see they've got notes all over them and coffee stains on them, because it's a working document. It's not something you put in the file and don't look at. Get it out and let's talk about it.
Mm-hmm. And you say each person writes their own review, and they only write the one.
They only write one.
Okay, so that makes them accountable for whatever's in it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And those, someone told me one time about the Gomer pile. Remember Gomer Pyle from Gomer?
Oh, yeah.
So we don't want any Gomer piles. Surprise, surprise. We don't want any surprise. We want people to know where they are, know where they're going, and be sure that we can help. Now, WD-40 is a great place, but it's not for everybody.
No, right.
If it's not working for you, we want you to be happy, and we'll help people be happy, but we want to always treat them with respect and dignity. One of the greatest books I've ever read was Everything You Need to Know You Learned in Kindergarten by Robert Fulghum. And if you really think about it, if you take those principles, say please and thank you, pick up after yourself, clean up your mess, if you go out late, if you take those principles and apply them to business, it's common sense.
A lot of it really is. So I'm interested, obviously coming from where I do, how do you go about the strategy process? So we talked a lot about the will of the people process, but also, how do you think about strategy?
Well, we have strategic drivers, and there are 5 of them. The first strategic driver is to make the blue and yellow can available to more people in more places and have them use it more often. And so that's the key driver of our strategy. And then we have must-win battles attached to that strategic driver that will help us. For example, one of our must-win battles at the moment is raising our digital IQ. We've come a long way in e-commerce in the last 5 years, and thank goodness we did the investing we did before COVID. Our e-commerce business is up 93%. It's just crazy. So we have clear strategic drivers. Now, here's one you'll find very interesting. We have a strategic driver that is to attract, retain, and develop outstanding tribe members. That's a strategic driver with a measurement to get our employee engagement to 95%. We publish that in our annual report. I talk about it on every earnings call. I have not ever seen any other public company make that public statement of this is a goal that we have. So And then we do strategic refreshes. We think in strategy cycles of 3 years.
Mhm.
So we want to be 2 strategic cycles out.
Okay.
So 6 years. And we actually publish what our goals are for 2025. So we've told the world, hey, by 2025, we want to have this amount of revenue. We want to have this amount of, here's how it wants to be broken up. Here's where we want to be globally. And then we go to work at it.
Wow. You know, when you say it like that, it sounds so easy. And yet, you know, when I talk to leaders, even very senior leaders in very senior companies, it's this mush, you know, and it's not clear to people.
You know, one of the things I think is sad, as humans, and sometimes we camouflage issues with confusion to make out how smart we are.
Mm.
And I think you've heard me, you know, we've been on a couple of calls together with our friend Marshall Goldsmith. And when he ever asks me to introduce myself, I say, hi, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong, and roughly right chairman and CEO of WD-40 Company. Because, you know, I don't know why we have to go out of our way to make things too complex. Let's get it simple so people can understand it. And then let's get on with it. And, you know, that's why we have 6 values. We have 5 strategic drivers. Everything's clear. You know, I read a great book, you'll probably know it, years ago by Al Rees called Focus, Your Future Depends on It. And, you know, when you think about a company, 90% of our revenue comes out of one thing, the blue and yellow can with the little red top. And who would have thought that over the last 20 years, we've nearly 5x the revenue of that. And our market cap has gone from 300 million to $3.5 billion over that period of time.
Wow.
It's a compounded annual growth rate of total shareholder return of in excess of 15%. But we just sell oil in a can. No, we don't. We're in the memories business with a high will of the people. So if you drew a graph, it correlates the growth in our employee engagement, our revenue, and our value of the company are like this. So duh.
It's that just, it blows my mind. It absolutely blows my mind.
And you know, I was thinking of a new book to write one day, and the title was "Even a Dumbass Can Do It," because that's me.
You're like the inverse of my friend Bob Sutton, who wrote this book that it's the no asshole rule, right? And he gets censored every time the book title gets mentioned. But he's all about your you know, soul sucking CEOs. So the COVID hits, right? And clearly this is, you know, a crisis of epic proportions. Like, I mean, I can't recall one that affected everybody in the world at the same time. So what did you do? You know, how did you start to make sense of it? And then what actions did you take?
So I happen to be, well, firstly, we have an operation in China. So early in sort of mid-January time, we saw the reaction to that as it came into Chinese New Year. And it's like, wow, what is this? And I was actually in Italy in the beginning of March on my way to London for our half-year European meeting when this thing started to unfold in Italy. And to me, it was a bit like that Indiana Jones movie with a boulder chasing me, this COVID thing around the world. So fortunately, we had a plan, not for COVID, but we have an issue response plan within the organization that's triggered around anything where we have to bring focused leadership together at one time. So we triggered the issue response plan. The people on that group of people are my senior leadership group. We came together and we said, okay, what are we going to do? Well, we set 3 objectives. The safety and the well-being of our tribe is our number 1 objective. Number 2 was being able to service our customers and support our vendor partners. And number 3 was to protect the infrastructure of our business so we could thrive at the end of this. So it was kind of like secure, reset, thrive. Secure, reset, stabilize, thrive. So we shut down our operations globally and brought everybody into virtual operation within about 4 days. It was interesting. We had all this virtual technology, but people weren't really using it. And then it became compulsory, and there was a big learning there. People can pivot around fear when there's a real need. So we're becoming better virtual. So, and then we got on to a few things, a few principles. Don't try to control things beyond our reach. So how do we come in? Let empathy lead the way. Every single person, he or she, was going through their own hero's journey. So we wanted to be supportive, over communicate, keep grounded in calm. I kept saying, we don't know what the future is going to bring, but we've got a strong company, and we will get through this together if we stay together. Resist the temptation to micromanage. I found a great article, a great video that was by Nicole Malachowski, who was a Thunderbird pilot, and she talks about a thing called induced oscillation, wherein you have, when she was a Thunderbird pilot, they had this plan when they hit turbulence of what they call fly loose. So they, instead of taking control of the controls and trying to overreact the aircraft, they all together were able to fly loose through the turbulence and therefore control it. And to me, that was what we had as a company, because our culture was our fly loose plan. So that was, and then, we had to rise above the fear. And as things moved out, we learned more every day, huge amount of communication with our tribe, huge amount of assurance to our tribe. And we came through. And here we are today. We'll never be a virtual company, but we'll be a better company because we're better at being virtual. We can't wait to get back together again, because we are so, tribal in our ways. But it's been a great learning for us. I've got a list of 38 learning moments from this, that, everything from, don't try to control things out of your reach, to, be humble, be tolerant, all the things that we wanted to turn the volume up when we flew into this situation. But thank goodness, Rita, we're closer to the end than the beginning.
That's what we're hoping. And one of my hopes for learning for all of the business community is that we take this as an opportunity to really reset the employment contract. One of my dear colleagues is a professor at MIT named Zeynep Tal, and she talks about good jobs and how good jobs can save us. And I think your company is really an embodiment of what that can accomplish. I'm sure you don't employ only PhD scientists, right? So you got people from a whole wide range of skills and abilities, and yet they're accomplishing these extraordinary things.
Absolutely.
And yeah. I just hope that this is, we don't just snap back to, oh, well, it's normal to have 45 million people paid $15 an hour, I hope we really take some strong lessons out of this.
I think one lesson this has taught us is we really do treasure the relationships that we have. We're not free right now. We're not free to be with our grandkids and our kids and our families, and every day that goes on, we kind of go, and
what day is it? You're on mute.
Yeah. You remember the Verizon ad, "Can you hear me now?" That's been replaced with "You're on mute."
That's true. That's true. And one of the things you did talk about in I forget which book, but you talk about alarm bells. And that's very similar to something I look at a lot, which is early warnings and being very conscious about the alarm bells in your own life. Have you reflected on that idea?
Yeah.
Well, maybe explain where it came from.
That was a wonderful learning moment for me. I was in London a number of years ago. I'd just flown in from Shanghai, and I was arrived late on an afternoon in London, and I went across the road to the Sainsbury's and got myself a little bit of dinner and a can of beer. And I love British comedy, and I decided I was going to turn on the BBC or whatever was on and try and find some British comedy. So I was in my hotel room, and I had a t-shirt on, a pair of shorts and a pair of flip-flops, and it was winter. And the alarm bells start going off in the hotel. Well, I did exactly what I've done many times before. I ignored it. You know, I'd stayed in thousands of hotel rooms and these things go off and someone turns them off, right? So anyhow, the alarm bell's ringing and a little time goes on and there's a knock on my door. Leave the room. Oh, so I grab my cell phone and my passport and I start my way down the stairs and I realize I've got a pair of flip-flops on and a t-shirt and a pair of shorts. And now I'm out in the middle of Berkeley Square in London in the winter. And I'm going, this isn't good. And then it starts to rain. Well, as you can see, rain doesn't do good for my hair. And I'm going, this is not good. My beer's in there, my dinner's in there, the British comedy's in there, and I'm out in the cold. So eventually they let us back in. It was at a time that a lot of high alert was on. Someone had left a backpack in the hotel, and fortunately it was okay. But I got back to the room, I don't know, an hour later, I'm freezing cold. And so...
You must have gotten a lot of funny looks.
Oh, you crazy Australians. So anyhow, the next day I'm flying back to San Diego, and I'm thinking in the area. I love being in aeroplanes because it gives me time to think, which I'm missing now. In fact, right now, what I do is I put a block of time on my calendar called flight time, and I go out into my sitting room and I sit in a chair and I pretend I'm on an aeroplane because I can shut down. The only thing is, only problem is nobody brings me champagne. But anyhow,
that's a bummer.
But I'm sitting in the airplane. I'm going, geez, this was stupid, Garry. So I thought, I got a piece of paper and I put alarm bells at the top. And on one column I put business and the other I put personal. And I started to list all the alarm bells that were going off in my life. And then I got a marker and I marked the ones that could be really influential. And then I did something about them. And I've told that story often is we have all these alarm bells going off, but if we're not hearing the alarm bells and deciding whether they're significant or not, you're going to end up in Berkeley Square in a pair of shorts and a t-shirt with flip-flops being very cold. And I took that back to our leadership group, and we've run that exercise a number of times to the point where, if we're doing a major project, we'll have a session and we'll say, okay, it's a year from now. We're going to walk into the boardroom and we're going to share with the board why this didn't work. Let's list up all the things that could go wrong. Now let's look at those that we can control and those we can't control. And our goal is let's pick 3 to 5 things that are really, really, really so critical that could go wrong that we actually pay attention to them. And that's the learning that we do. So yeah, that cold night in London was a very nice learning moment.
It'll capture your attention. And of course the lesson, right, is had you paid attention to the first bell,
exactly,
you could have put some clothes on.
Exactly.
I think that's so smart. And so often people, and I see this in the world of innovation, so often people envision some kind of future, and then they have this whole plan, and we've got the committee, and the committee produces the PowerPoint, and then there's somebody who puts together the spreadsheet at the back of the plan, and there's 12 people on this team, and we all go marching off into the future, and you end up with Quibi. $1.7 billion on something where honestly you could have tested some of those ideas along the way, and it's just a different way of thinking, right? It's envision the future and then work backward rather than sort of assume things are going to make progress going forward.
Yeah. So I mentioned to you about these 3 most important words that I've ever learned in my life. I don't know. And there was a learning moment around that as well. I'd only been in the US a short period of time. And I remember I was in a meeting room and there was someone from an outside organization making a presentation to us. And they were living the theory of let's camouflage this issue with confusion to make out how smart we are. And I'm sitting there in this meeting and there's bunch of other leaders in the room, and I'm going, I have no clue what this person's talking about. And this had gone on for about 20 minutes, right? And everybody's sitting there like, what is this? Excuse me. Not long in this country, but I have no idea what you're talking about. Guess what happened, Rita?
What happened?
Everybody in the room went, because nobody knew what this person was talking about, but it was, the dumb Aussie who was kind of brave enough or stupid enough at that time to put up their hand and say, well, hey, we don't know.
Mhm.
And again, that was that other learning moment of just getting comfortable with saying, you're confusing me. And can you back up a little bit? I'm not getting it. I need to understand. I need to seek to understand what you mean. Let's gather the facts and be clear about what's our intention here. And so often people run off and don't do that. And as you said, there are simple little things they could have identified, could have saved them a bunch.
Well, and I think what then sets in is this culture of fear, because you presented your pitch, the board has blessed it, the senior team it's in the budget, the revenue is in the budget for 18 months from now. And then, you do your first market test and the market kind of says, why do you think we want that? And then you get into this mode where it's like, we're going to make it work. And there's this distinction between being willing to pivot or change in a smart way and being persistent, right? And to me, there's the way I frame this is there's a difference between persistence and obstinacy. And persistence is saying this is a worthy goal. I've got to figure out how to get there. And obstinacy is I'm just going to keep doing this over and over and over again. And by brute force, it'll sometimes work. It's interesting. You mentioned that rank and stack that they used at GE. They did the same thing at Microsoft. Now, and I thought it was crazy back then. They don't do that anymore. But so Microsoft, the hiring process is famous, right? I mean, there's like 15 steps. You have to meet 25 people. It's just really, really, they really look for super smart people, and they find them and they get them. And then they turn around and say 10% of them aren't worthy to be here. It just makes no sense, right? So I hope we're past that stage.
I do too.
So you talk a little bit about the components of a tribe. And we had a question about rising above fear, and how do you do that? Was the question.
Well, fear and uncertainty. What's the definition of uncertainty? A series of future events that may or may not happen, and in most cases, they don't happen. So, I think fear is either real or it isn't real. I love in what Brené Brown writes, where she talks about in the absence of facts and data, people make up stories, and then we do believe them. And I think a lot of fear is a lot of made up stories because we haven't gathered the facts. So, if you have a circle of safety, it's about, am I safe? Can I be honest? What do I need to do to be able to be, honest around this and not punishing people for just being honest. And I think that's the reverse of it. So, I know what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of heights. Mm-hmm. I know that, but there's not, and there's nothing I can do about it. I don't like going to the edge of a building. It's like, I don't like it. But in organizations, you don't have to be afraid of heights. As long as you've got a circle of safety where people are treated with respect and dignity, the leadership shows vulnerability. One of the things that, I'll give you an example of fear, when we first started on these virtual platforms, people were afraid to come on because they didn't want to look like they didn't know what they were doing. I purposely screwed up a number of times on video calls, purposely. Or I let Max the Wonder Dog wander in here and, make a noise or whatever, because I wanted people to see that, this is life, accept people are going to be human, accept that you're human. It's okay. You don't have to be, dressed up. I have my shirt on here, but I'll tell you, I've got my flip-flops down the bottom here.
I love that. There was a wonderful New Yorker cover a week or two ago that's been making the rounds with this beautiful woman, who's absolutely pristine from here up, and the rest is just a mess. I think we're all having those kinds of those moments. So you talk about the values of a tribe, and I think this might be a good thing to go over. So learning and teaching, living the values, belonging, future focus, specialized skills, warriors, and celebrations. Do you consciously have to go back to that now, or is that just sort of so embedded in the way that you behave that it doesn't need conscious attention?
For me and for most people, I think if they've been here a while, it's embedded.
Mhm.
But I got the opportunity to, look at the Indigenous Australians and the Fijian Islanders. And I went to Fiji and I sat with tribal leaders there and I asked them, tell me what keeps these people together.
Mhm.
And, for example, specialized skills was one of the things that is big in a tribe. If you talk to a tribe in Fiji, they have people who are specialists in fishing. They have people who are specialists in hunting. They have people who are specialists in building. They actually have a specialist group around succession planning of the tribe. So having that and saying, okay, we as tribes have to be, aware and respected that there's going to be specialist skills in there. Celebration is very, very important. Life's a gift. Don't send it back unwrapped. Let's celebrate. So,
That's wonderful.
Values, without doubt, values are the bedrock of our company. And I'm a great fan of The Godfather. In fact, one of the reasons I was in Italy last year is I always wanted to go to Corleone, the city in Sicily where the mafia started, only because I was intrigued at how this tribe gathered up. And one of the things that, about values is even the mafia had values. If you've watched Godfather 1, you'll notice that there are values and the consequences. Now, you may not agree with those values, but the consequences. And so if you go onto our careers page, the first thing that flies up at you is our values. And it basically says, if you can't align with these values, please don't call us because you will not be happy here, basically. So all of those attributes, and again, as I said, learning and teaching were very important in our business. I love to learn. I'm, as you know, I teach at USD now, and I teach culture in the program that I took 21 years ago. I teach a culture class in that program. But I learned so much. And where do you learn? You learn in the classroom when you're teaching, because you get all this feedback. It's, oh, great, this is good. I didn't realize that.
One of the most interesting things I learned as a young professor was that there's a sort of a retention pyramid, right? So you keep about 10% of what you read. You keep about 20% of what you read if it's accompanied with a visual and, blah, blah, blah. But where it gets incredibly powerful is when you teach others. That's when you learn the most. So I used to say to my students, well, I'm just absolutely delighted you're all here in the classroom. I'm going to benefit so much from you. It's wonderful.
Well, I have this thing about learning. Education, you read the fine print, formal education. Experiences when you don't. When you put both of those together, you have learning. From learning, you generate knowledge. And when you put knowledge to work, you get wisdom. Mm-hmm. So you've got to go through that flow to have that happen.
Absolutely. In the book, you mentioned that you've discovered some of the weirdest ways people use WD-40. Are there any good ones that come to mind that you can share?
That I can talk about, yes.
Well,
a couple that I think are interesting. There's a lady in the Midwest who had a bird feeder in her backyard, and she used to put bird feed in the top of the bird feeder, and the lovely birds would come and eat. Well, there were some squirrels who really used to love to eat the bird feed. So she used to spray WD-40 on the pole so the squirrels couldn't find their way up the pole to eat the bird feed.
That's a wonderful image.
And so the squirrel didn't get hurt, the birds got fed, and the lady was happy. There was another one which is quite weird. There was a burglar who got stuck in an air conditioning duct. He was trying to rob a bank. I think it was in Colorado or somewhere. And actually he was naked. And when the fire guys came along, they had to spray WD-40 around the edge of the air conditioning duct to be able to pull him out by his feet.
Why was he naked?
To get, obviously it was a tight fit in the air conditioning duct. So... Yeah.
That's amazing.
But my favorite use is, I'm an Aussie, so I got a barbecue. And my favorite use is I clean my and polish my stainless steel barbecue with WD-40. Makes it shine really well, stops the water from drying on it. So I have the shiniest barbecue in San Diego.
I'm going to remember that one. That's a practical tip we can use. So a bunch of different questions come up about things like vulnerability and what does all this mean? How would you suggest people can learn more?
From what we do?
Yeah.
Well, we've got, I've published articles on LinkedIn if people want to go there. How can they learn more themselves is really, firstly, adopt the fact that, it is the power of the people. There's plenty of stuff out there that has been written about this, and for years. The trouble is people don't put it to use. They go back to their old ways of, business is about the last 90 days. I love Simon Sinek is a friend of mine, and I love his latest book, The Infinite Game. So if anybody wants to really read about how you build an enduring company over time, Simon's book, The Infinite Game, is a must read. But I'm on LinkedIn. I publish stuff up there from time to time. So follow me there. And I have a website. It's called thelearningmoment.net. And I put blogs on there and other stuff that I've learned up there as well. So
that's fantastic. Oh, I didn't know about that. That's really great.
I actually have one too that's called the soulsuckingceo.com.
What do you publish there?
It's linked to the learningmoment.net.
Oh, it's interesting. Scott Adams of Dilbert fame used to say that he got all his ideas from readers who would send him these ridiculous workplace situations that they had actually experienced. So maybe there's an opportunity for you to gather up some of these soul-sucking stories.
Yeah, that could be. Might be my next career, right?
There you go. There you go. So what are you looking forward to once we get through whatever it is we're in at the moment?
Oh, my people. Yeah. I just miss being out there with the people. I normally travel about 200,000 air miles a year. I love, listening to them, they help me be wise. They tell me what's really working and what's not. And I still communicate with them a lot. I send an inspirational message out every morning via email to all of my people around the world. It's called For Today From. And normally it would be For Today from London or Sydney or wherever. For the last 10 months, it's been For Today from Poway, which is where I live in San Diego. But I'm really looking forward to getting out there with my people. I miss them dearly, and I love them so much. And I'm just so pleased and grateful that they're all doing well. And, we've kept our tribal promise, Rita, a group of people who come together to protect and feed each other. And that's what I'm so grateful for.
That is fantastic. Well, it has been such an honor to share an hour with you, and I'm just so pleased. I think we need to clone you. Can we copy you throughout corporate America? It would be wonderful. So Garry Ridge, and enjoy the weekend, enjoy the holiday to come, and I'm looking forward to 2021 and what it brings.
Yes, me too. I said this was the roaring 20s in 2020, but 2021 is going to be the smiling year.
That's wonderful. Thank you, everyone.